I moved out of my parents' house because they ignored me and didn't care, and later they started demanding that I used to think that being ignored was better than being hated. That silence was a kind of mercy. I told myself that over and over again when I was a kid, sitting cross-legged in the hallway with my homework clutched in hand, waiting for someone to ask me how school was. No one ever did. Our house was quiet, not the comforting kind, more like the air was always holding its breath. The kind of silence that builds up like dust. Dad worked late, or at least that's what Mom always said. Mom was around physically, but her attention was always somewhere else, on the TV, on her phone, on the pile of bills she stacked and restacked like a nervous habit. We lived like polite strangers sharing the same space. Meals were eaten in separate rooms. Birthdays were marked with a generic, "Happy Birthday," text and maybe a store-bought cupcake left on the kitchen counter, usually a day late. When I was little, I used to draw them pictures. Crayon scribbles of houses and stick-figure families holding hands. I'd stick them to the fridge. By morning, they'd be gone. Thrown away, like old grocery lists. The older I got, the less I tried. By the time I hit 17, I stopped saying good morning or good night. No one seemed to notice. Conversations shrank to one-word questions: dinner? Homework? Laundry? I answered when I felt like it. Sometimes, I didn't. Still, nothing changed. When I turned 19, I started planning my exit. Not because of a fight or some dramatic moment. It was quieter than that. I just realized one day, standing in the kitchen and staring at my reflection in the microwave door, that I didn't belong there, that I never really had. I got a job stocking shelves overnight at a grocery store about an hour away. The pay wasn't great, but it was enough. I saved up, looked around, and found a room in a shared house with 3 other people my age. The lease was short-term, no questions asked. I packed in silence over the course of a week, little by little. A backpack first. Then a suitcase. Then the last box, carried out at 2 a.m. while the house slept. No one saw me leave. No one asked where I went the next day. A full week passed. Then 2. Then a month. I thought maybe they were giving me space, maybe they knew and just didn't care. I told myself that was fine. It had always been like that. I'd gotten used to the background role I played in their lives. Some days I even convinced myself I liked it. There was freedom in invisibility. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I got a call. It was my mom. Her name lit up my screen like a surprise quiz. I stared at it until it stopped ringing. She didn't leave a voicemail. The next day, she called again. And again. Then Dad called. Then they both started texting. "Where are you? You need to come home. This isn't funny." At first, I ignored them. Then the tone shifted. "We're worried. You can't just disappear. You're still part of this family." That last one made me laugh, out loud, bitter and sudden. It startled my roommate, who was slicing an avocado in the kitchen. I didn't explain. I just walked to my room, shut the door, and stared at the message again. "You're still part of this family." The thing was, they didn't even know when I left. They didn't notice until the quiet grew inconvenient. I didn't respond. For weeks, the messages kept coming, each more frustrated than the last. Finally, Dad called and left a voicemail. His voice was tight, annoyed. "We're not going to keep chasing you. Be an adult and come back already. You don't just walk out on your parents." Walk out? There was nothing to walk out of. I hadn't been in anything. Not in conversations. Not in plans. Not in affection. I was just a fixture, a shadow in the hallway, a closed door down the hall. If I'd been a houseplant, they would have noticed the wilted leaves before they noticed I was gone. But now, suddenly, I was expected to return. For what? I didn't know whether to feel angry or amused or just tired. There was a part of me that wanted to scream at them, demand an explanation, ask why they thought they had the right to pull me back now. But mostly, I felt empty. Like a chair someone finally realized was missing from the dining table. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I stayed quiet. The calls stopped for a while after that. Maybe they finally gave up. Maybe they decided I wasn't worth the energy. I wasn't sure which would have been worse, being abandoned again, or being dragged back out of guilt. I kept working my night shifts, kept paying rent, kept making myself small in the shared house where no one asked too many questions. But about a month later, I ran into someone who changed everything. I was restocking cereal boxes at around 3 a.m. when I heard someone say my name. Not my nickname. My full name, the one only my parents and old teachers ever used. I turned around, already bracing for the awkwardness. And there she was. Mrs. Langston. My old neighbor from across the street. She looked older, thinner maybe, but her voice hadn't changed. She was holding a half-empty cart and blinking at me like I was a ghost. "My goodness," she said, walking closer. "Your mom said you were off at college or something." I just stood there, one hand still on the shelf. College? She must have taken my silence the wrong way, because she smiled, warm and wide. "Oh, don't worry, I won't tell. Everyone needs a break now and then. But you should call her. She's worried sick." I nodded stiffly and turned back to the boxes. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't take a deep breath. After she left, I finished my shift on autopilot. When I got home that morning, I sat in bed and stared at the ceiling. College. That's the story they were telling people. That I was away, learning, doing something respectable. Studying for a future that had never even been discussed. No one ever asked me what I wanted to do with my life. They just assumed I'd figure it out. Or maybe they never thought about it at all. I opened my phone and scrolled through the unread messages. Most were from a few weeks ago. But 2 were recent. One from each of them. "Mom, you can't avoid us forever. It's time to come home. We need to talk. Dad, we're still your parents. Still." That word again. Still. As if being a parent was a title you kept no matter how badly you neglected the job. I didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, I dug out a photo album I'd taken with me. Not because it meant much, but because I didn't want to leave everything. It was one of those dusty old books with plastic pages, full of blurry photos from birthdays, vacations, holidays. But as I flipped through it, I started to notice something strange. In almost every photo, I was on the edge. Barely in the frame. In some, my face was half-turned, or blocked by someone else. There were more photos of my cousin's dog than there were of me smiling. And the ones where I was front and center? They felt posed, forced. As if someone had said, "Take one with the kid too," and then moved on. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I wrote a letter. Not because I thought they deserved it. But because I needed to say something, even if I never sent it. "Dear Mom and Dad. You didn't notice when I left because you never noticed when I was there. You talk about family like it's some unbreakable thing. But to me, it felt like a room I was never allowed to decorate. A place I was supposed to be grateful for, even though it never gave me anything to hold on to. I don't hate you. I don't even think I want revenge or answers anymore. But I also don't owe you a return. I've built something, small, fragile, but mine. And I won't give it up just to make you feel better about your own silence. Maybe someday we'll talk. Really talk. But it won't be on your timeline. Me. I didn't send it. I folded it up and left it in the back of the album. It wasn't for them. It was for me. The next weekend, my roommate Jamie invited me out to a small get-together. Just a few people, some music, nothing fancy. I almost said no. My instinct was to stay home, quiet, invisible. But something tugged at me. A flicker of curiosity. Maybe hope. I went. It wasn't life-changing. No one gave a speech or handed me a map to the future. But someone asked me what I liked to do, like really liked, and waited for an answer. That simple act knocked something loose in me. I told them I liked writing. Not that I was good at it. Just that it helped. They nodded and said, "That's cool. You should keep at it." No judgment. No confusion. Just acceptance. That night, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a shadow. A few days later, another message came in from Mom. "We need you to come back for the weekend. It's important." No details. No apologies. Just expectation. They still didn't get it. But I was starting to realize, they didn't have to. I stared at that message for what felt like an hour. "We need you to come back for the weekend. It's important." Those last two words carried weight, but not the kind they probably intended. Important meant something to them. Probably a family dinner, or some neighbor's birthday, or a visit from distant relatives I barely remembered. I could already imagine the scene, people asking where I'd been, them dodging the truth with half-smiles and vague answers. I'd be reintroduced like a missing piece of furniture dragged back into a room. I didn't respond right away. I didn't want to give them the impression that I was just waiting for the signal to come running. But something about the word weekend made my stomach twist. It meant time. A pause. An opening for all the things that had been left unsaid. Jamie noticed I was quieter than usual that evening. We were in the living room, eating cheap takeout and watching some old movie with terrible sound. She nudged me with her foot. "You good?" "Yeah." She raised an eyebrow. I sighed. "My parents want me to come home this weekend." Her mouth made a small, "oh" shape, but she didn't say anything for a few seconds. Then, "Are you going?" I shrugged. "I don't know. I don't think I want to. But part of me keeps thinking I should. Like, maybe I owe them." Jamie leaned back on the couch. "Do they owe you?" I blinked. She said it so simply, like it was a basic equation. Balance. Give and take. And I realized, I'd never thought of it like that. I'd spent so long measuring my worth against their attention, trying to earn what should have been unconditional. I didn't even know what I was owed anymore. Still, I didn't delete the message. I left it sitting there, unread in the app, like a pebble in my shoe. By Friday, another text arrived. "Dad, your mother is upset. We expected better from you." Better? I laughed out loud in the middle of the staff break room. It startled a coworker, who gave me a look. I just shook my head and went back to my sandwich. That night, I finally replied. "Me, you didn't notice when I left. You only noticed when it got inconvenient. I won't be there." I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Silence. The whole weekend passed without a single reply. No follow-up call. No guilt trip. Just silence. It should have felt freeing. But something about it made the air feel heavier. Sunday night, I got curious. I searched their street address online, not for any creepy reason, just to look. I hadn't seen the house in months. I wasn't expecting anything, really. But a local event site popped up with a listing. Annual summer barbecue, hosted by the Willoughbys, all neighbors welcome. The Willoughbys. My parents. It was that weekend. They hadn't wanted me back for some heart-to-heart. They needed a prop. A role filled. A full table, a happy photo. I pictured them rehearsing small talk about my college journey or creative soul or whatever fiction made them feel like good parents. The idea of it made me nauseous. I closed the laptop and went for a walk. There's a coffee shop about 3 blocks from the house where I rent a room. It's always open late on Sundays, and the barista recognizes me now. She gives me an extra shot of espresso without asking. I like that about her. That tiny kindness. I sat by the window, watching people pass on the sidewalk. Couples, joggers, kids on scooters. They all had somewhere to go. Someone waiting for them. I used to think I didn't need that. That I could build a life without any roots. Just keep floating from one room to the next, unseen, untouched. But the truth is, we all need someone. Just, not always the people we start with. I pulled out my phone again and opened a new message window. Not to my parents. To someone else. My cousin Riley, the only one in the family who ever talked to me like I mattered. We hadn't spoken in a year. Me, hey. I moved out. Been living on my own for a while. You around sometime? Would be good to catch up. She replied 20 minutes later. Riley, OMG. Yes. I've been wondering where you went. Thought your folks were being weird about it. Wanna grab lunch soon? And just like that, something softened in my chest. A tether, small but real. There was a life beyond the house I left. A better one. One I could build piece by piece, conversation by conversation. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was running away anymore. I felt like I was choosing. I met Riley the following weekend at a small cafe near the river. She looked just like I remembered, sharp eyes, quick smile, a kind of energy that made the world feel slightly less heavy. We hugged longer than either of us expected, and for a moment, I realized how long it had been since someone pulled me into an embrace without obligation. She pulled back and said, "Okay, seriously. What happened? Your mom told everyone you were in some writing program out west." I snorted. "She tell you I got a scholarship too?" She mentioned something like that. We both laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was absurd. Riley listened quietly as I told her the truth. About the silence in our house. About how I moved out in the middle of the night and no one noticed. About the texts that followed, the barbecue invitation disguised as concern. I didn't dramatize it. I just laid it out flat, like an old photograph on the table. She shook her head slowly. "That's messed up." I shrugged. "I don't even think they meant it to be cruel. It's just how they are." Riley stared at her coffee for a moment, then looked at me. "You know what's the weirdest part? I'm not even surprised." That hit me harder than I expected. We talked for nearly 2 hours. She told me about her job, her roommates, her parents, my mom's sister and brother-in-law, and how they were always polite about you, but weird. She said she remembered Christmases where I barely said 10 words, and everyone acted like that was normal. After lunch, we walked by the river. The sun was warm, and people were out in boats, kids tossing bread to ducks, joggers weaving between dog walkers. It was peaceful in a way I wasn't used to. Riley nudged me at one point and said, "You're allowed to be happy, you know." I smiled. "I think I'm figuring that out." When we parted ways, she said she'd check in soon. And she did. The next day, in fact. Then again a few days after that. Nothing big, just memes, random thoughts, short messages, but they added up. They reminded me I wasn't drifting anymore. Still, something lingered. A weight I hadn't shaken yet. A week later, I got an email. Not a text. Not a call. An actual email, from my mom. Subject, "Let's talk." Body. "We know you're angry. We didn't handle things the best way, but we never stopped caring. We were scared. You left and didn't say anything. That hurt us more than you know. We want you to come home so we can figure this out. You can't just cut us out." I read it twice. Scared? They were scared? I was the one who packed in silence. Who stood in the doorway hoping, just once, someone would ask me if I was okay. I was the one who sat at dinner tables, invisible. Who learned not to expect anything because nothing was ever offered without strings. And now they were hurt. The old version of me, the one who measured love in crumbs, might have responded. Might have rushed home to smooth it over, to soothe their fear, to prove I wasn't as cold as they made me feel. But I wasn't that version anymore. I replied the next day. Subject, "Let's talk." Body. "You say you're scared. That it hurt you when I left. But I lived in that house for almost 2 decades without feeling seen. You didn't ask why I was quiet. You didn't ask what I needed. And when I left, you didn't notice for weeks. I didn't cut you out. I removed myself from a place where I was already gone. I'm open to talking. But not at the house. Not as if nothing happened. If we talk, it's on my terms. Somewhere neutral. Somewhere honest. And only if you're ready to listen, not just explain." They didn't respond for days. When they finally did, it was short. "Okay. Let us know when." It was strange, not satisfying, not healing, just real. For the first time, the conversation had weight. Boundaries. I didn't rush to set the meeting. I gave myself time. I focused on work, on writing, on building a small routine that was mine. Jamie and I started planning weekend hikes. Riley sent me an old photo of us at a Halloween party when we were 10, dressed as a pirate and a bat. She wrote, "You always looked a little sad. I'm glad you're not anymore." I wasn't sure if happy was the right word yet. But I was lighter. Then one night, something strange happened. I had a dream, the kind that stays with you long after you wake up. In it, I was back in the house. Not as a child, but as I am now. I walked through the hallway, but everything was slightly off. The walls were too tall. The doorframes were narrow. When I looked into the living room, it was empty. Not just of people, but of furniture. Bare walls. No pictures. No sounds. Then I heard a voice, my own, whispering, "They only saw you when you left." I woke up in the dark, heart racing. That dream wasn't haunting. It was clarifying. I'd spent years trying to be visible in a house that had no mirrors. Now, I was starting to see myself. And that was enough. 3 weeks passed before I messaged them again. I thought about it a lot. What would I say? Where would we meet? What tone would I take, defensive, neutral, open? I didn't have the answers, and maybe that was okay. I'd spent my whole life trying to be prepared for every conversation, every disappointment, rehearsing what I might say just in case they ever really looked at me. And when the moment came, I didn't have a script. Just honesty. I can meet next Sunday. Somewhere public. Somewhere quiet. Dad, okay. You pick. I chose a small diner near the edge of the city. Not too crowded, but not hidden either. I wanted to be in a space where no one could raise their voices or rewrite the moment. A place with light. I got there early. Ordered a coffee and sat by the window. My hands were cold, even though the air was warm. Every car that pulled into the lot made my stomach flip. And then, there they were. Walking in like they hadn't changed at all, Dad in his old work jacket, Mom in the same beige sweater she wore every fall. They looked like parents from a movie. The kind that nod politely and ask how school is going. We sat. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Dad cleared his throat. "You look healthy." I nodded. "I am." Mom stared at the table. "We didn't mean to make you feel pushed out." "That's the thing," I said, keeping my voice steady. "You didn't do anything. And that's what pushed me out." They both flinched, slightly. But I didn't stop. I was invisible in that house. I don't think you ever really saw me. Not when I was 6. Not when I was 16. Not even when I left. "I saw you," Mom whispered. "You just didn't seem like you needed much." "That's because I stopped asking," I said. After a while, silence feels safer than disappointment. Dad looked away. His jaw clenched. I think that was the closest he got to showing emotion. "I'm not here to punish you," I continued. "But I'm not here to pretend everything was okay either." They nodded. Slowly. Awkwardly. Like people nodding along to a language they barely understood. Then Mom asked, "So what now?" And I told her the truth. "I don't know. I'm not cutting you off. But I'm not coming back either. I have my life now. It's not perfect, but it's mine. If you want to be part of it, you have to meet me where I am. Not where you think I should be." More silence. But this time, it didn't feel like avoidance. It felt like absorption. We sat a little longer. Talked about neutral things, work, weather, traffic. No big breakthroughs. But when we stood up to leave, Mom gave me a hug. Not tight. Not teary. Just a gesture. And that was enough. After they left, I stayed behind a few minutes. Paid for my coffee, tipped the waitress, then stepped out into the parking lot and let the sun hit my face. Something had shifted. I didn't feel lighter. I didn't feel vindicated. I just felt done. The version of me who needed them to notice everything, the birthday cards, the absence at school plays, the late-night questions never asked, that version had finally stepped out of the hallway. I walked home that day. Past the old bookstore I sometimes visited. Past a couple holding hands and laughing. Past a mural painted with the words, "Some things are built, not found." And I realized that's what I'd done. I hadn't found happiness. I hadn't stumbled into it like a prize. I'd built it, out of silence, out of absence, out of long walks and quiet coffee shops and small conversations that finally meant something. I still get messages from them sometimes. Short, hesitant. Like people knocking on a door they're not sure will open. And sometimes I reply. Sometimes I don't. But the difference is, now, it's my choice. And I don't disappear anymore. I live. Thank you all for watching the video, and see you soon.